Welcome everybody. I'm really happy today to show you AWS Cloud9. And before we're going to dive into the webinar, let me just walk you through the agenda today. So we will start with the 3 pillars of software development. And I'm just going to share a little bit about how we think about software development here. As a next topic, we'll talk about why we set out to build a new IDE. Then after that, we'll dive into the Cloud9 benefits. So I will just share some of the strong points of Cloud9. And then we'll dive into a demo where we just explore the IDE and dive deeper on some of the features. After the demo, we'll look at the region availability, and then there's going to be time for questions and answer, so you get all questions covered you might have. So let me just dive straight in, and let's have a look at the 3 pillars of software development. So as you're all engineers, you know, of course, it starts with creating and writing code. Once you've done that, you step over to releasing, you want to push something to production, and then as a third step, you run your code in production. So AWS comes with a range of services and tools which support you running your services online. And so AWS comes with EC2, with Fargate, ECS, Lambda, and a whole other range of compute services which enable you to run your applications in the cloud. Next to that, there's a range of storage services. So you have RDS, Aurora, Redshift, S3 for file storage, and many more. So really, there is a whole range of services which allow you to exactly cater to your needs of your online services. Let's step to the next section, and that is, or the next step in your process, and that's the release process. So with code commit, you can maintain your source code, and you can work in a team committing to the same repository. Once you've done that, you very likely want to build artifacts with something like code build. And then you can push your build artifacts to production and run your production service. All of these steps today can be orchestrated with code pipeline. And so already today you have a whole range of tools to get your code from the IDE into service, into production. Last year we launched CodeStar, and CodeStar helps you to spin up the entire pipeline very, very easily. And so you don't really have to spend much time configuring something like code commit, code build, and code deploy anymore. So as the third element in this chain here, we want to talk about creating and writing code. And with this, we'll be talking about AWS Cloud9 today. Cloud9 is a cloud IDE for writing, running, and debugging code. So why did we create a new IDE? And I think this is going to be interesting. So the first thing, and I'm pretty sure that this probably relates to many of you, we're building software for the cloud, but we're using local machines, and there's a disconnect. So if you look at the pain points of that, developers today rely on local machines and hardware configuration. So your laptop might not be the same as what you're running on production. It's hard to multitask on various projects. So just imagine you have one customer project or one of your own projects, and then you want to quickly switch to another project. It's very hard. You don't have the same software installed, the same dependencies, and so you waste a lot of time. And third, it's difficult to work from multiple locations. Even with a laptop, imagine your laptop dies. Now you have to set up your environment again. The second pain point we want to address is that it's cumbersome to set up your development environment. So very often when you get started, you install an IDE, you then install plugins, configure your IDE, set up the settings, the syntax highlighting. As a next step, you need to configure your stack. So you might be using Docker or Docker Compose today, and you need to do that for every project which you're working on. And then last but not least, ideally at least, you want to match your environment with your production environment. And that's very, very hard today. And once you have done that, only really then do you start writing code. And I'm sure you're familiar with this pain. It's taken time, and you've probably done this many, many times. So before you start writing code, you spend quite a bit of time on setting up. Now imagine you have a bunch of projects, and that is usually the case. So you want to develop something for EC2, and then you want to work on a different project which is running on Lambda, yet another project which is running on ECS, and all of this is taking a bunch of time until your environment is set up. And then we can multiply this again. Just imagine you're working in a team. Every member of your team needs to do this and spends a ton of time on configuring their environment, keeping it up to date, and maintaining everything you're using. And so that takes time. The third dimension we want to address is collaboration. In the past, it's been hard to collaborate, especially with remote people, or imagine you want to have a code review. You need to get everybody stand behind your screen. Screen sharing tools are cumbersome to use. You would have to install them, and then other folks wouldn't have them installed. And that's something we think is important. People work in different locations, and you want to be able to easily collaborate. The fourth dimension we want to address is that IDEs today have not caught up to the needs of serverless applications. Lambda is really changing how we think about building services in the cloud. And with this, also your tooling needs to adapt. And tooling today doesn't really cater to the needs of serverless application. And so with this, we're introducing AWS Cloud9. And let me just share you some of the details of what Cloud9 is. So really, Cloud9 is an IDE running in the browser. So you can launch a Cloud9 IDE from any machine, any laptop, any desktop station, as long as you have a browser. You can very easily and very quickly start new projects. So as I mentioned earlier, usually you would be installing the IDE, you would install plugins, you would configure your stack, you would then try to match your environment production, and only then would you start writing code. With Cloud9, all of this is now one single step. You just create a new environment and all your configurations are just there. And then you can code together in real time. You can today very easily just invite someone into a Cloud9 IDE session, and you can collaborate on a piece of code. You can run a code review. If you're teaching someone to code, you can easily do that in Cloud9. And it's just a matter of seconds until you have a collaborative session going. You can build serverless applications with ease, and I'm going to dive into that in the demo in just a bit. But there's a very deep integration with Lambda. You don't need to set up anything. You don't need to set up any credentials. It just works out of the box. And then, as we're developers and we really want to have direct access to the compute we're working on, Cloud9 provides you a terminal to directly access your machine. And with that terminal, you also get direct access to AWS services you're using. So you don't anymore have to configure your credentials. You can just use the AWS CLI right out of the box. And I think this will address a lot of pain you probably are used to by now. You don't have to do any of that anymore. So with that, I want to dive into the demo, and I'm going to show you Cloud9. And so let's just switch over to the browser. So what I have open here is the landing page of the AWS Cloud9 console. And here on this page, you see a welcome screen. You can directly jump into creating a new Cloud9 environment. And then there's a bunch of links which help you getting started quickly and just answer a bunch of questions you might have. Before we create a new environment, let me just run you through the console in a little more detail. So I just opened up the menu here to the left, and there you will see that we have three menu items here: your environments, shared with you, and account environments. And so let's have a look at your environments. So what you'll see here now is a bunch of tiles, and these are all my Cloud9 environments I have set up in the past. And you see I ran a bunch of demos here. So this is this is the current focus of my engineering efforts. We'll dive into this in just more detail in just a bit. Let's have a look at the shared with you section. You see that this is currently empty, but imagine that I'm collaborating with someone, that a colleague of mine has invited me to a Cloud9 environment, and so I would see those environments here, anything I'm a member of. And then the third section is the section where I can see all the environments within my AWS account. And so imagine you're a larger team with maybe 20 engineers. Here you would see, as the administrator, all the projects, all the environments of the engineers. Or imagine you're in a school or university, you would see all the projects and environments here. So let's head over to your environment, and I'm going to go here to the right and click the Create Environment button. The first thing you need to do when you create a new Cloud9 environment is you need to give it a name. So let's just call it Webinar. And then you give it a description. This will be a great webinar demo. I hit next. And here, this is where it's getting interesting. So the first thing you need to choose, or you can choose, is the environment type. And Cloud9 comes with 2 environment types. The first one is EC2, and that's what we're going to be using ultimately. And the second one is SSH. Let me briefly explain SSH first. So imagine you have an existing EC2 instance, for example, or compute somewhere else. The SSH environment allows you to easily connect to any machine and start working on that. We're not going to use that today in this webinar. We're going to be using the EC2 environment instead. And so I'm going to go back and select the create new instance for environment EC2. You can then pick an instance type. We picked 3 for you, but ultimately you can pick a whole range. So for this demo, let's just pick the T2 small. And then we have an interesting setting, and I think this is also very relevant for teams, for instance, where we can shut down your instance after a given amount of time. So imagine that you go to work at 9 in the morning, and then at 5 you're done. You don't really want to pay for the instance which is running anymore. So you can just pick that you want to shut it down after 30 minutes, and then we will shut it down for you. And then in the morning when you pick up your work, we can just resume this. There's also settings for advanced use cases. You can pick your VPC and subnet. We're not going to be using that today, so I'm just going to close it again and let me hit next step. So here now we see just a confirmation screen. You can just check that everything is as you expected it to be. And now let me create the environment. So let me explain a little bit what's happening behind the scenes now. So we're now provisioning an EC2 instance right in your own account. So let's have a look at that. I'm going to head over to CloudFormation. And so what we see now here is this CloudFormation stack, which we have spun up. And so you see, first of all, we created the CloudFormation stack as a first step. Then we're setting up an EC2 security group, which already completed. And then we're setting up the EC2 instance. So let's head over to EC2. And you see I have 6 running instances, and now I have so many instances here already that I'm actually not seeing the one we just created. Let's just see, I think it's this one here. So it's a T2 small instance, and you can just use this as any other EC2 instance. So I think the creation is done. Let me head back to Cloud9, and now here you see the IDE open and ready to go. And so back to the slides I was giving earlier. This was the entire setting up of your dev environment, and it's super fast. And now you have an EC2 instance right at your hands where you can build your app and write some code. So let's explore Cloud9. Cloud9 is an IDE, as I mentioned, so you'll be used and familiar with the UI. Let's start with the terminal here at the bottom, so I can run, commands. It's very fast. We'll have a look at the performance later. There's certain panels here. So here on the left, you see I have the README. So let me just open that up, and you see in the terminal at the bottom here, the same README is here. I can click on the name here, open it, and it's open. You can navigate your files very quickly. There's a whole range of shortcuts, and I'm going to dive into more settings later. But as we want to build a little project, I've prepared something. Let's head over to GitHub. So here I have a simple GitHub project. Let me just copy the Git URL, and now I'm going to go ahead and clone this repository. And just here you saw another benefit of running your dev environment in the cloud. Even though this was a very, very small repo, it was super fast. So you're not really relying on your local connection in the office or at home. So we cloned this project, and it's a fairly simple static website. So why don't we have a quick look at how that looks like? So here I have some HTML. Cloud9 comes with a preview service, so I can just preview this HTML file, and you see here now I'm previewing what I'm working on. I can even pop it out of the IDE, and so here I see the full thing I want to be working on. Let me go back to the IDE, and let's dive a little bit into some of the language features. So let me close this here, and you see I can drag and drop windows around. Cloud9 has very powerful windowing support, so you can really arrange your dev environment as you like. So let's walk through a bunch of just language samples here, very basic examples. So here I prepared a very small JavaScript file. You see here I'm defining an object, and so there's code hinting. So let's have a look here. Bar is assigned a value but never used. So why don't we go ahead and use bar? And you see here we have auto completion. So it's showing me all the properties of that object here. So I could do bar.hasOwnProperty, but let's just do console log bar.abc. You see here I'm missing semicolon, so I'm just going to be adding that here. And obviously this is a very, very basic example. We'll go into more depth later. Let's just run this here. So I'm pressing the run button, and you see down here now we're logging out 1, 2, 3. Let's hop over to a very basic Ruby example. And again, you'll see, there's error handling if my source code is invalid. So here we have a syntax error. So let's just fix that again. And again, it's super easy to run. I'm just hitting run, and here we are. You'll see here at the right, there's a bunch of runners you can select based on the language you're writing your code in. And so it automatically detected that we're using Ruby here. It picked the Ruby runner. I can just hit run, and now I have this output here. So that just works. And let's move over to the last example, a basic PHP example. And so there's two ways we can run PHP examples in Cloud9 today. And the first one is actually using a built-in web server. And so I just hit run again. The web server was spun up, and I can now preview the running app. Here, obviously, you see there is nothing really happening there, as I haven't defined any routes or something, but it's just running. And if I now want to run just the PHP CLI, I can pick a different runner here, stop this web server, this process, run again, and now it's going to just output what I expected the program to execute here. So very basic example of what you can do, super easy to use. And with that, I want to showcase some of the other really exciting features of Cloud9. And so let's head over to the settings. So Cloud9 is very, very configurable. You'll see here, and I can't really cover much in this webinar, but you'll see that, for instance, we have a setting here for my EC2 instance, which you saw earlier in the creation flow. I can just change the auto shutdown setting to an hour instead of 30 minutes. You can define tabs versus spaces and how you want to work with your indentation. There are different themes, so let me just use a different theme and go just back to this one. You can entirely customize your key bindings, so really make the IDE your own. And the nice thing here is that the settings are persisted between Cloud9 environments. So it's not that you would define them here and that you would have to redefine them in a different environment. It's just the same across Cloud9 environments. And then we have AWS settings. That's going to be relevant for the Lambda integration I'm going to show. So you can pick the region. We're going to be using the Ireland region. And that's going to be it for now. So let's hop over to the AWS resources panel here on the right. And I want to show you something which I'm really, really excited about, and what in my past has been something which was pretty tricky to work with. And what I want to show you today is the Lambda integration we have built into Cloud9. So I've opened up the right panel here, and you see Lambda there on the top. And let's just go through the example of building a new Lambda function and just running and debugging that. And you probably know in the past that hasn't been exactly very easy. So I hit the Lambda button there on the right. Let's give the function a name. So we're calling it testing Lambda. Hitting next. We already bring a bunch of templates which make it a lot easier for you to get kickstarted. I think we'll just take the empty Node.js template here, and then You can pick a function trigger. We'll leave it to none right now because I just want to showcase the pure Lambda functionality. We'll specify 128 megs of memory, and then we automatically ask for role generation. Then here you have a summary. We just hit finish. It all looks good. And now we have created this very, very basic Lambda function for you. Here in the top, you'll see that we're also deploying the Lambda to the AWS region EU West 1. So now you want to run this Lambda. And in the past, that's been kind of tricky. In Cloud9, all you have to do is hit run. Let me close the panel here on the right. And you see this new panel opens up here. And the first thing you want to probably do is just specify a payload. So let's just specify a payload here. And then hit run. And so what's happening now is that the Lambda is getting executed. And you see the response is null here. And as someone who's new to Lambda, you probably want to just kind of step right in and run through the code and learn by doing. And what's really nice now is that you can just hit a breakpoint here, enable the debugger here on the right, and then hit run again. And so in the past, I've always wondered how this event property looks like. I never really knew. And so now you see, oh, it's actually the payload we're passing in. I just hovered over this this argument here, and now I can inspect it. You can also have a look at the context. What is that actually? What's in there? And so you can really, step in and learn how your code works. At the bottom here of the right, there's an immediate window. So let me just enter context, for example. And so I can inspect this object here and just see everything what's passed in. And that just makes learning, building Lambdas very, very easy. So let's pass something to the callback. And the signature is usually error, and then the object you want to pass back. So let's not pass an error, and let's just pass back the event. And continue the execution here. Let's run it here. Oh, and something is not working as expected, and I think that's let's just step through it again. Let me remove the breakpoint here, and let's take out the error callback here. And we're still having null. Let's step right in. And so the event is it's not doing what we expect it to do. So let's just try it one more time here. And oh, I think I know what I didn't do. I didn't save. So let's just resume indeed. And now you see here the response is actually exactly what we put in. And so this is super easy. You can really debug your code and just step in and run through it. And now once I'm done, I can go here, open up the panel, highlight, select the function, and just click deploy, and we would now be deploying the Lambda to production. And so in the panel here, which we just worked with in debugging the Lambda, you can pick where you want to execute your Lambda. So we just ran it locally. Why don't we try and run it remotely? So I just picked remote, and now we run it again. And you see, as we deployed it just now, the expectation was that actually the response is what we just sent here in the payload. So let's just make sure that we're actually really running as we expected, and you see here it works. So very easy. And let's go back to the demo and the application we cloned from GitHub. So as you saw, let me just show you what it did. It was a simple HTML page. Let me just preview again and open it up in a new window. It's a very simple file uploader. So I can just click on upload image. Here we have the Cloud9 logo. It's uploading. And now it's showing this. So how does this work? Actually, what we're doing is here on this web page, we're actually calling a Lambda function which returns a signed URL, which allows us to upload an image to S3. And so why don't we just have a look at that application in more detail? So I mentioned it's talking to a Lambda. So let's go to the AWS resources and have a look at the remote functions. And you see here I have a demo uploader Lambda remote function, and let's download that. So here it's asking us, do you want to import this? And yes, we want to import it. So let's have a look here. Let's close the AWS resources panel. You see it was already automatically opened. Let's just clean up a little bit, close some windows. Let's just close all other tabs. And now you see here, this is actually our Lambda, which returns a signed URL, which we can use to upload an asset to S3. So this is all new code here. I haven't really worked on that before, and I want to learn and understand how it works. So as I showed earlier, we want to run it. So why don't we just again set a breakpoint, hit run, and I do know in this case that it's actually an API gateway application. So I picked in the dropdown here API gateway. So let's just make a bit of space. We have a payload here. I'm activating the debugger and I'm hitting run. So breakpoint got hit. Let's have a look at the debugger here. So you see we have the call stack. You can jump around in the call stack, go back. You can inspect variables. You can resume execution. But the one thing I always, as I also mentioned earlier, the one thing I always wonder, what does this event and context property look like? And especially when you work with API gateway, it's not always exactly clear. So let's have a look. So I entered event down there here, and you see it's this object where we have the HTTP method, we have the body, the resource, and a couple of other properties. Really what we're interested in is the body, because that's where we pass the content type. So let's resume execution, step to the next statement. Here we're now parsing the event body. So let's jump again to the next. You'll see once I hover over event, I should see it here. Doesn't do it right now, so let's just execute it down here in the immediate window. And you see here now that I have the content type as I expected it to be. So let's resume execution. And you see, I don't have any execution results yet. Hold on, let me just run this again. And now here we see that the response is a one-time upload URL and the result URL. And so this is what we're using to upload our static asset to S3. And so you see here a very basic example of how you can use API gateway with Lambda to build a little service which allows you to upload images to S3. So I'm having some issues with my static application I just built, and I need some help. So let me just show you how it looks like again, and hit the preview button. So I'm previewing the index HTML. Here we have this simple application. And so, as I said, I need some help. And I've been working with Dan for quite a while now. And so I know that he can help me with this. So I'm opening up the collaboration pane here to the right. And right now you see that I'm the only one working in this environment, working on this code base here. So let me invite Dan to this environment. And I opened up the share dialog, and down here I can invite members. So Dan is an IAM user as part of my AWS account, and I can give IAM users either read or read-write access. As we want to both collaborate on this, I'm going to give Dan read-write access, and I'm going to invite him to this environment. I'm just going to confirm that. And now Dan has access to this environment. He can head over to his shared with you section, and he'll see the project there. And now he's probably opening up his IDE. And we see here that he just came online. And you see that there's a little green dot here to his name. And I can just start chatting with Dan to see how he can help. So let's have a look. I think we need to change the color of the button here. So let's see if Dan can help with that. And you see he already jumped right here into the source code, and we can follow his cursor. And this is real time. So I just closed this here. You see he's highlighting and he's marking the section. Indeed, this is exactly what we need to change. So, oh, I see, he's changing it to button success. So let's have a look. Let's just refresh. Oh, and this is much better. I think this is a really nice button now. I think also the background color is really not the best. So let's see if Dan can help with changing that as well. It's a little bit boring how it is right now. And this is kind of where it gets nice, because of course collaborators open up different files, and I can just see where Dan is working on here, and there you go, you see he's now changing the background color to some other color. So let's jump right back in here, reload the static page, and now it looks really, really nice. This is a wonderful change. And so one of the really kind of interesting features of Cloud9, especially for example for students, is the revision history. So let's just have a look at what Dan actually changed. I'm hitting here on File and then Show File Revision History, and you see here I can now play back what exactly happened. This is just a little nice feature which we've seen work really well in classroom contexts and others. Let me close that again. As a last thing, we want to deploy this demo to S3. And in the past, you would have to download the SDK, you would have to configure your credentials, and that would take quite a bit of time. Now with AWS Cloud9, this is all done for you. We're seeing here that we're now collaborating together in the terminal. Let me just show you the AWS CLI. So again, as I said, you don't have to install anything, you can just run it. Let's have a look at the lambdas we have. So list functions, and you see here all the functions I have, and I didn't have to configure anything, the CLI just works. And so I wonder, how can we now deploy this to S3? Let me just ask and see if Dan knows how to do this. And let's have a look, and we should then also see him doing exactly that. Oh, and there we go. So now he's pushing everything to S3, super fast, and it's just up there and running. And ultimately, let's have a look at the final demo. I did cheat a little bit. I stored the link here, so let's just open that up. And you see here now the final uploader just deployed to S3, and it's working as expected. So this is concluding the demo. And I want to head over to the last part of this webinar. Let's just switch over back to the slides. So let's talk about AWS Cloud9 availability. Cloud9 is available today in 5 regions: in US West, US East, 1 and 2, in Ireland, and in Asia Pacific, Singapore. And then about pricing. So as I mentioned in the beginning of the demo, there's 2 types of Cloud9 environments. There's one, the managed EC2 environments, and then the SSH environments. And for using managed EC2 environments, we don't charge for the IDE, and you pay for the standard compute and storage costs. So it's the cost you usually pay for an EC2 instance. And then for running SSH environments, there's no charge for the IDE, so it's entirely free. And so with that, I want to again thank Dan for the wonderful demo, and I want to head over to the Q&A.